Well, better late than never. Friday afternoon, Golden Black Live, and now there are just two of us, so to speak, starting Brian Newbert on my right, Alan Karpick, goldenblack.com. And we are going to get right to our guest here in a minute. But Brian, obviously a big weekend. We're going to talk a little recruiting in our first segment, but obviously the Boilermakers a big weekend for them when they travel, as Kyle and Stacy are, to Minneapolis to play Minnesota.
Yeah, I think you have to have this one if you're Purdue, coming off a 3-game losing streak, still winless in the Big Ten. At this point in time, all your opportunity games are behind you. None of them went your way. Notre Dame, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio State, those were all the games you played this year hoping to do something pretty big. That didn't work out. You look at the schedule the rest of the way now, you got 3 winless teams in the Big Ten out of your last 5 games. Penn State's obviously might be the hottest team in the Big Ten, so that one's going to be tough. At Iowa's going to be tough, but you got to get Minnesota, Illinois, Indiana probably, and it starts tomorrow with Minnesota.
It absolutely does. Boilermakers and Gophers tee it up at 3:30 on the Big Ten Network from Minneapolis. And we'll get to that and break that game down. We also, today, a little change in our schedule. We'll have Josh Helmholtz from Rivals.com on the line with us. And Josh, are you there? Hello, Josh.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Maybe
Hello.
Josh is not there. Josh, you there?
This is Roosevelt Colton.
Ah, we got Roosevelt first. Then we'll go ahead and start with Roosevelt then. Roosevelt, we both Brian and I are battling colds, and we have deep voices, and your voice is way too deep for Josh. So we'll be happy to have you on. Roosevelt, thanks for joining the show, and we'll switch gears and start talking Purdue, Minnesota, and obviously the Boilermakers. You can relate to this situation a little bit. 1998. In your senior season, you guys were sitting at a game under 500, I think 3-4, made a strong run at the end of the season, and got yourself in a position to have one of the great bowl victories in Purdue football history over Kansas State. Talk about where the Boilermakers are now and what you see is the challenges ahead for Purdue.
Well, I think where they are right now, just trying to scramble to get themselves back in order. You looked at the outlook coming into the season. It was a great opportunity, and still is a great opportunity, to put themselves somewhere on the map when it comes to recruiting, solidify themselves when it comes to having another winning season in school history. Win, the first couple of ball games, you lose to Notre Dame, you win against Marshall, and then you've dropped a few in a row. Now, and you're in a bad position where you got a bad taste in your mouth, and so it's up to Coach Hope and the staff to get the guys, sort of rallying. You don't see quitting, and that's a great thing. You go up against a good Ohio State football team in Ohio, and for the most part, they played well. Came down to the last few minutes of the ball game, just couldn't make any plays, and then into overtime. And so I think they're still in a decent position where they could have a successful season. But this weekend definitely is crucial in the next couple of weeks following that, where you face a couple good teams, and you got to make sure that you're hitting on all cylinders, because you have no room for error right now.
Yeah.
Roosevelt, you had a couple games in 1998. I'm thinking of the Notre Dame game. I'm thinking of Wisconsin. I'm thinking of Penn State, where you were so close to winning a pretty big game, kind of like Purdue was this past weekend. When you're in situations like that, can you really kind of take any positive from it, any confidence, anything like that, or is it all a matter of, what might have been?
Yeah, well, you don't want to be cliches, but I think win or lose, you can always take something from the game. Tight ball games, they tell you 2 things about your ball club. 1, you weren't good enough to win that particular ball game, but 2, there's some things you have to work on, because when they say football is a game of inches or seconds, and it literally is. I mean, there's you add another 2 minutes back on regulation, or somebody catch a ball here or there, or somebody make a tackle on this down. And I just think remember, being that close at the Ohio State game, the defense being that close to the quarterback Guyton, and potentially getting a strip sack or a sack and shutting the drive down. He throws the ball up and gets a touchdown. So it's just the little things that you have to continue to work at, and a lot of times that's the difference between teams that are 9-3 or 10-2, and a team that ends up 6-6. That year, my last year in West Lafayette, I distinctly remember a young quarterback by the name of Drew Brees was behind center, and I know for a fact that Notre Dame game, we lost in the last 5 minutes of the game. We were throwing the ball, Drew threw an interception. They returned it to, I don't know, probably the 10 or 15 yard line, and we almost blocked the kick. to seal the victory. And those are the types of things you're in. We only lost 3 ball games that year, and all those were close games.
Right.
Potentially, you're looking at the difference between a 9-3 team and an undefeated season. So there's definitely opportunities out there that they can look at on film. I think these kids understand that. Coach Hope understands that, and that's why you see them each and every weekend competing. They just got to compete at a different level at different times. They got to start it off fast instead of waiting until the end of the ball game sometimes.
Yeah, now you don't have any posters of Tony Driver that, even in your days in the league, where you used to run into him, and I think he was the guy that made that interception, as I recall, in the game in '98. But no, there are things like that happen, and yet it is about for Purdue trying to find ways to move it forward. Talk about Minnesota and what you know about the Gophers and what kind of challenge in terms of how you see tomorrow's game potentially playing out.
Well, from what I've seen from Minnesota, defensively they have some defensive linemen that can put pressure on the quarterback. They move at a fairly fast pace. They don't have a lot of names, a lot of big name guys, but they work together well. They work together well as a unit. And so if they're in a position where they're up or they're playing from in front, then they get the chance to use that speed that they do. They roll off the ball from a defensive lineman perspective. Offensively, they've sort of been Jekyll and Hyde. If you start the year with Marquise Gray at quarterback, doing well, doing things really well for Coach Keel, he goes down. They have to put in a new quarterback. He does okay. Marquise Gray comes back. He goes back down. Now the word on the street is they got a young freshman that potentially could step in and take over the starting role. And it's a situation where they're trying to figure themselves out, especially from from an offensive standpoint. You go from a more athletic quarterback to a pocket passer, and so I think they should definitely expect a challenge. I don't think they should go in there feeling like they're a huge favorite, but at the same time, they've played well. The Boilermakers have played well enough against better competition that I foresee them coming out with the victory tomorrow. It all boils down to taking care of the football and then on defense getting stops and getting off the field.
When you kind of go into a game like this and the other team's going to play a true freshman quarterback and they just moved the quarterback that you've been building your game plans around for the last couple of years when you face these guys, you kind of go into the game really not really knowing what to expect. Obviously, they're going to watch film and stuff like that, but still when there's that much novelty in an offense, it would seem like a situation where you'd almost kind of expect the unexpected a little bit, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that is true. I think knowing what type of player he is will go a long way, and that's the coach's duty to prepare themselves on that end so that they have a game plan. You're always going to have your base fronts, your base coverages, your base blitzes, and so those are things that you should be able to rely on when you get yourself in a grind or a pinch where you're trying to figure some things out. I think they should be able to formulate some type of game plan to give them an opportunity of being successful. It's just a matter of whether or not they're going to see different things from him, whether or not he's going to be the option style guy or whether or not he's going to be the pocket passer. What it's going to boil down to then, once they figure that out, is game time adjustments. Yeah. Once you come to the sideline after those first 1, 2, or 3 series and you see, okay, this is the type of offense they're running, fellas, we're going to go to this type of game plan against that. You got to be able to put that in play, and you got to be able to do it on the run. And if you can't, then that's where you get guys like Joe Montana, where he was inserted from Notre Dame, as a freshman or whatever year he was, and now he's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. Don't be the team that allows this guy to show up and turn into the next great quarterback out of the Big Ten.
Good advice. There are a couple of questions from fans in the chat room. Why do you think, and you've been around teams, certainly your first 2 years at Purdue, you didn't win as often as you wanted. You turned it around in your junior year when Joe Tiller came in. What do you think it could be some of the reasons why, in 4 years under Danny Hope, Purdue struggled with inconsistency? Some weeks great, some weeks not to the level that they need to be. What do you think causes that? All the teams that you've been on over the years in high school, college, and in the NFL, what causes that, you think?
Well, I definitely think the first few years of Coach Hope's head coaching resume was a little bit skewed because of the quarterback situation. When you have your guy that you think is going to be the starter for the next 2 or 3 years go down, You have a receiver that led the Big Ten go down. Then you have your running back. And you come back the next year, then your quarterback and your running back go down. It makes situations a little bit difficult when it comes to offensive coordinators' point of view. But that's where recruiting comes into play. You can't just go recruit and have the best guy at one position and then have a huge fall off when it comes to your quarterback play or your running back play or your wide receiver play. Having a stable of individuals that are able to go out on the field any given Saturday is the key, and that's the difference I think right now. Just at a couple positions that Purdue has, I think by far this is the most skilled offensive group that Coach Hope has had when it comes to wide receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks. Offensive line is doing a decent job with what they're asked to do. I think one of the big adjustments that I think fans would love to see is an identity of an offense. Are we a run offense? Are we a spread offense that's going to run the option plays, et cetera? And so once you can do that as an offensive coordinator, then you can be more aggressive because you know what you have when it comes to your team. And that, I think, will allow a little bit more of a success rate when it comes to being on the field. I think each and every week, what I see from an offensive standpoint, we're this one week and then the next week we're that. And it's not consistent. And at times you can catch people off guard, but I think it's really important to figure out who you are and know that this is the type of team we are and go from there.
Rosie, one of the questions we have also in the room is, what is your weekly schedule like? Obviously, with your work with the Big Ten Network, and a lot of Purdue fans obviously enjoy your work there. But what do you do? When are you in Chicago, and how does that typically work for you?
Let's see. Let's start with Sunday. Sundays, I do work for Wish TV 8 in Indianapolis and do the pregame show for the Colts at least every other week. So Sundays are filled with football, which is a great time to sit back with my family. Although I'm working, but I'm able to sit at home and watch the games. I work at the station in the morning. Mondays are usually the relaxed days. Get the opportunity to take the kids to school, spend time with the family again. I think a lot of people know that my wife and I own a UPS store and a bakery in Briar Brook Village in Indianapolis, and so those days where I'm not doing analyst stuff, so that's usually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm doing small things on the side for them, and then I do coaching too. I coach my son. He's 7 in the 2nd grade, so I'm coaching him in basketball, and then I run my own flag football league every Saturday in Indianapolis at Park Tudor High School. I have about 100 kids out, and we run a flag football league. It's called Roosevelt Colvin, and Courtney Roby's All-Pro Flag and Cheer, and they have a great time at that. They get NFL jerseys. I coach them in that as well, and then on Friday, I come up to Chicago, which is where I am right now. We have a meeting in studio. We shoot the show. Everybody sees it on Friday night. They replay it on Saturday. And then Saturdays, most of my day is on the field at the flag football program. And we repeat it each and every week until we get worn out. But I'm very, very fortunate, very, very blessed, man. I've been able to experience a lot of great things in my life, starting with Indianapolis and then the great opportunity to go to Purdue University. Huge parts of my foundation and who I am today. And the bonus of playing 10 years in the NFL is just I couldn't have imagined having that opportunity. And then on top of that, winning a couple of Super Bowls and meeting some of the people and doing some of the things I've done. So I'm very, very honored, humbled to be a Boilermaker, and I will always rep the gold and black until the day I die.
Yeah, you do a good job of that on the BTN. Certainly, I think that comes forward front and center. We're going to let you go in a minute. Did you ever sack Tony Banks? Did you guys ever play head-to-head? I know in his time at Michigan State in '95, but did you ever sack him at some point in time when you guys went head-to-head?
In college, we didn't. Actually, the funny thing you asked me is, I took Tony to the train station last week, and we were talking about it. I was like, man, I don't know if I remember ever playing against you. And we did in the NFL. I was in Chicago, and he was playing for the Redskins. I can't remember if I sacked him, but I know we beat him that day. It was a low-scoring ball game. Tony's a great guy, great personality, great quarterback, did a lot of good things in the Big Ten as well as in the NFL, and great compliment he gave me, not bragging about myself, but he said, because I was playing with Urlacher and a few other good linebackers then, and he said that they asked him on the conference call, who was he looking for? He wasn't looking for Urlacher, he was looking for me. So I take pride in like I said, who I am and the things I've been able to experience. And like I said, being a part of the Big Ten is great conference, great tradition, and have a good time with Tony here on the show. But yeah, I played against him one time in the NFL, I believe.
All right, Roosevelt. Hey, thank you so much taking time out of your busy schedule today. And man, your schedule is busy, but we appreciate it. And always, I know Purdue fans always enjoy seeing your bright, shiny face up there, and not only on television, but when your time is back to in West Lafayette. So Brian and I, we're going to take a 2-minute break, slug a little more water, and get our throats ready. We'll have Josh Helmholtz on the second session. And then we'll break down also Big Ten basketball and Media Day in the third session. That's if we can continue to talk to one another during that time. So stay loose and stay tuned, and we'll see you back here on Golden Black Live in a couple minutes.
Going to the Purdue game? Stay at Hilton Garden Inn, West Lafayette at the Wabash Landing. Your family will love the well-appointed guest rooms, the pool, whirlpool, fitness center, the breakfast buffet, and the amazing Hilton Garden Inn staff. Located just 4 blocks from Purdue University, Hilton Garden Inn has long been the choice for Purdue fans. Call today for a reservation and make Hilton Garden Inn your #1 choice.
Check out the Purdue collection now at Follett's. Boiler up with Nike Fantastic T-shirts, League and Champion fashion colors. Simply fabulous, simply Follett's. Purdue pride everywhere on game day. Nike sideline, worn by the team, by the players, and by you. And make every day game day with tailgate toss. Follett's, Purdue pride, a Purdue tradition, 17 game day locations.
Wouldn't it be great if we could all rest this easy? Well, when it comes to meeting your insurance needs, you can. State Farm agent Trent Johnson is there to get you the coverage you need and the discounts you deserve. Home, car, life, even financial services. It's just part of being there. Call or visit Trent today. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
It's a Friday Night Frenzy. It's about tradition. It's about pride. It's about rivalries. It's about commitment. It's about teamwork. It's about the action of the game. On Friday nights, when area high school teams hit the field for the game, our team hits the field to get you the scores, the highlights, and all of the action. Friday Night Frenzy, a high school tradition.
Segment 2, Golden Black Live. We just heard from Roosevelt Colvin, and had some insightful things to say, and obviously his busy day at the Big Ten Network. His show airs tonight as well. Brian Newbert, Alan Karpik with GoldenBlack.com, and we also want to do a little bit of house cleaning here, or housework, so to speak, and thank our sponsors, Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day. Stay at HGI tonight. And State Farm agent Trent Johnson at TrentIsMyAgent.com. Trent is in his own state tournament of Indiana football. He'll be out refereeing a game tonight. Who knows, they might make it to the state finals as an officials crew. He often does. And of course, Jeff Julich and our friends at Follett's Purdue Pride, at Purdue Game Day tradition since 1945. And Brian, just getting back from Roosevelt, it is kind of interesting. We were talking off air before we get to Josh Helmholtz here about the Boilermakers and his comment about continuity at offense and knowing what offense you are. And, the Boilermakers kind of changed some things last week against Ohio State, running more of a two-back set, some stuff out of the eye. Do you sense that this is going to be Purdue's attack tomorrow, or do you not know? It
would probably be the right thing to do because Minnesota is very vulnerable against the run. They've given up, I think, 180 or more yards in all 3 of their Big Ten games so far. They have a pretty smallish front, I believe. The offensive line is coming off maybe one of its better games of the year, certainly its best against a good opponent, I think. And it would just seemed like the right thing to do tomorrow to try to establish the run early. This is a pretty good pass defense. They're going up against Minnesota. They've only given up 4 passing touchdowns all year. 2 of them came at the end of games that were already won for Minnesota. They're only giving up maybe 150 yards in the passing game this season. They got 2 pretty good pass rushers, Rashid Hageman and I can't remember the other kid's name, but they're 2 pretty good defensive ends who can rush the passer. So it would seem like on paper, at least, this would be a game where Purdue, it might be in their best interest to come out like they did last week, run a lot of 2-back stuff, run a lot of 2 tight end stuff, try to be physical early, and see what happens. But what it comes down to is it all comes down to the offensive line. I think the offensive line played pretty well last week. Whether they can maintain it, we'll find out tomorrow. But I think that's kind of the key to everything. Whether it be the passing game, whether it be the running game, whatever. I just think, Purdue has to get that solid play up front to be functional as an offense.
All right, one of the things that Roosevelt Colvin talked about was recruiting, obviously, and Brian lives and breathes that more than he cares to admit, not only football recruiting but basketball recruiting. We have a friend of the show and a longtime friend, Josh Helmholtz, and he's the Midwest college expert, recruiting expert for Rivals.com. And Josh, first, I know you got a game you're going to be watching here in about 30 minutes, and we kind of screwed up your schedule, but thank you for taking the time to join us.
No, hey guys, glad to be on. I appreciate you having me.
And you are in Cleveland, which everybody should be in Cleveland, I think. But you got a game tonight, game this afternoon at 3:00. Tell us what you're watching this afternoon. And my guess is the weather's changed there from yesterday to today.
Oh yeah, I watched it in shorts and short sleeve shirts last night covering a game up here, and today I'm bundled up and it's rainy and it's cold, and that's kind of been the fall in the Midwest, hasn't it? So today's Cleveland Glenville, obviously one of the Midwest's top talent-producing high schools over the last decade. Ted Ginn and Robert Rose and all these guys that have come out of Glenville, and they got another strong crop, mostly in their underclassmen group. Marshawn Lattimore could end up being a top player in the Midwest. I'm going to get a chance to see him for the first time today live. I've seen him on film. An athlete type, could be a wide receiver, could be a defensive back. He will be recruited by everybody, but they've got a number of other guys. Marcellus Jones is already a heavily recruited offensive lineman in that junior class, so definitely excited to see Glenville today.
And obviously Purdue is not has a lot of its emphasis in the Southeast, but the Boilermakers have a couple name players from the state of Indiana. Tell us about what you're seeing about Purdue on the road and on your travels, and the job that Danny Hope is doing. At least there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about Danny Etling on down the line. But what do you see so far out of the Boilermakers for the class of 2013?
Well, I think one of the best things Danny Hope did, and you're seeing more teams do it, is have a specific staff member, administrative more type staff member, as opposed to an assistant coach dedicated to recruiting. Obviously, Paul Ganella was there before. I have Kevin Maurice who worked with him. Those guys, having that dedicated administrative staff member, I think has really upped Purdue's ability to recruit, not just in the Midwest, but obviously, like you mentioned, they get down to the Southeast quite a bit. They've had successes in the past in Texas. So I like that. I think that's one of the best things Danny Hope has done from a recruiting standpoint while he's been at Purdue.
Josh, just obviously we've talked quite a bit over the last couple months about Danny Etling, and there's a pretty big disconnect between his recruiting stock and his productivity as a high school player. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I think his high school team is pretty overmatched in the conference it plays in and whatnot. But can you maybe just kind of talk about what you saw from him on the camp circuit that has made him such a highly regarded kid?
Yeah, and that's not uncommon either. I mean, if you'll remember, Matt Barkley threw 17 interceptions his senior year of high school.
Kyle Orton did too.
Comes out and starts, as a true freshman at USC. Another guy that's having that same type of issue is Shane Morris, who moved up to 5 stars, the Michigan commitment. He's not having a strong statistic-wide season. So when you get these guys, take them from a high school offense and now get them around college coaches, college quarterback coaches, and in a college system, that's where these guys are going to excel. And looking at the numbers, I don't have any concerns going forward with Danny Etling. This is a guy who, when we saw him a year ago, thought, there's some nice tools there. And he worked with some top guys, like Cam Cameron was one of them. His progression and what he's shown in that progression is his ability to be coachable. I think has been outstanding, and he has stood toe-to-toe at multiple events with the top quarterbacks in the country, and many times beaten. And we saw that a number of times. Saw that at the Elite 11 where he outshone Brian Burns, who's going to Stanford. He's generally regarded as one of the top 100 players in the entire country. And he's done that, camp in and camp out. He's got the tools. I've got very little concern about him moving on to the next level and being able to be a huge factor leading that offense for a number of years for Purdue.
You've paid pretty close attention, obviously, to recruiting. What's the hardest position you think to recruit for these guys?
Especially in the Midwest, it's defensive tackle, but I think that's nationally, too. You need to have a defensive tackle for, number one, the body type. It's not a common body type.
Right.
And at the same token, those guys have to be some of the best athletes on the field, too. So you're looking at a big 300-pound kid who also is a great athlete. There just aren't that many of them around, and there are more in the South than there are in the Midwest. So Midwest schools, Big Ten schools, I think that's where you see, the SEC had the biggest advantage over the Big Ten when they go head-to-head, is in the middle of that defensive line. And that's just because there just aren't that many of those types of players in this region.
You look at around the Big Ten, and obviously so much, the Boilermakers traveled to Columbus last week and faced Urban Meyer and Ohio State. And game result aside, obviously Urban Meyer's influence and his and his role now that he's in the Big Ten, is it as simple as that Ohio State and Michigan are head and shoulders above everybody else in the Big Ten, or is that how do you see it, and how do you see Urban Meyer's effect on the Big Ten in terms of recruiting?
One of the first things, Brett Bielema, I think, made the comment, we don't want to recruit in the Big Ten like they recruit in the SEC. I think that's kind of a no-holds-barred type of mentality, which I don't disagree with. I mean, you have to recruit kids all the way till National Signing Day, whether they committed to you in March of their junior year or whether they're still uncommitted going into the winter. You've got to recruit kids all the way till the end. I think, he's probably up the bar in terms of talking about Urban Meyer, up the bar when you're discussing intensity that's required to recruit. And so I think overall, I think it'll be a good thing for the Big Ten because it should drive more talent their way. Right now, Michigan and Ohio State have, and they did this last year too, they were competing nationally, had top 10 classes in the country. Nobody else in the Big Ten was top 20. That needs to change, and it's going to be tough to change if the perception of the Big Ten continues to be low as we're seeing it right now.
One thing I will say about coaches is they hate it when people recruit committed players when they lose those players, but when they turn around to do it themselves, it's perfectly fine, right?
Brett Bielema took Keelan Brookins, a 4-star defensive back who had been committed to Minnesota, and now committed to Wisconsin. So
funny how that works, huh?
Swing both ways.
And Purdue will never forget certainly the Roundtrees of the world, and certainly that is one of those things that I think Brian's hitting it dead on there. We have a question, and this may be as much for Brian as it would be for Josh, but about what's the deal with Randy Gregory. He keeps saying he's a Boiler, but keeps getting offers and taking visits. When does he sign on the dotted line? Brian, I'll let you answer, and Josh, if you got anything else to add to that.
My answer to that question would be, he keeps saying he is a Boiler, but keeps getting offers and taking visits. That is my answer. He is getting a ton of offers. For some reason, he's got a broken leg, but he got 5 offers in the past week and a half, including Nebraska, including Washington, including UCLA. West Virginia offered him last week, and Kentucky offered him last week. He's not even playing this season, but all of a sudden, all these offers are coming out of the blue. He's taking some visits. He went to Iowa State last weekend. He is going to Nebraska this weekend. He's coming to Purdue December 3rd. I know he just talked to Danny Hope last week. I've talked to him a number of times, and he's always been pretty forthright with me. Now, of course, I can say he's being forthright now. Now, if he ends up doing something else at the end, it turns out he wasn't forthright at all. But he keeps saying he is going to Purdue. I think there are some people around him who want him to at least go through the process somewhat. He didn't really go through the process in the first place. He didn't really go through the recruiting process. Purdue offered him. He committed mid-season. I think Purdue might have been his only visit. I think he just wants to kind of see what's out there a little bit. And he's a kid. He probably wants to go out on these weekends and and have some fun, which really, really is better than sitting in Yuma, Arizona with a broken leg.
I think Gregory's an important part of this class.
Yes, he is.
And that probably goes without saying, but when you're talking about true difference makers, I think this kid has the potential. And we saw a little bit of that when he was coming out of high school a few years ago, but it was obviously he needed a few years of seasoning to get to his potential. Well, he's had that few years now, and I would assume, even though I don't cover the JUCO ranks and I haven't seen him lately, that couple of years has done him good, and I think we're seeing that with the offers that he's receiving. But Gregory has a chance to be a true difference maker. He's got that type of potential.
From a physical standpoint, he's a pro, I think. I mean, he's big, he's fast, really athletic, really long. What's kind of interesting about him now is when he was first recruited by Purdue, he was recruited as a defensive end. I think that's where he still projects. But for his junior college this year, had he not gotten hurt, he was going to play outside linebacker. And what you see Purdue doing right now is they're kind of running that flex position where they have a guy playing defensive end, but sometimes he'll play linebacker as they kind of adjust their fronts. I think Randy Gregory might be able to do that. And what's especially valuable about him now that he's broken his leg and is sitting out the season is Purdue doesn't just get him for 2 years, they get him for 3 years. And this is a guy who is still growing into his body a little bit. So had he come with just 2 years, I don't know if he really would have had all that much time to really maximize his physical potential. Now, you look at this kid potentially as a senior in college 3 years from now, he's going to be a beast.
Yeah, no question. Last question we want to get to, you had on the board about just the overriding landscape of football in the Midwest in terms of, is this an up year, down year, sideways year? I mean, and maybe also for the class of 2014, extremely talented group in this area, or how do you view that?
State of Indiana is definitely on an up year. I mean, the talent, the depth of talent, the top-end talent. I mean, obviously it starts with Jalen Smith, but you've got, the Danny Etlings and the Antonio Allens and the Elijah Daniels and Darius Lathams. I mean, top to bottom, it is a very, very strong year in the state of Indiana. Ohio's about average. Michigan's probably a little down. Illinois is up. And next year you're looking at, I think Indiana will probably be a little bit up again. Probably not quite as much as it was this year. But, I'm looking at a good year for Indiana. Looks like another good year in Illinois. Ohio's probably going to be a little bit down. So all in all, I think, this year is probably in general a little bit up. Next year will probably be a little bit more average in terms of talent level in the Midwest. But, as I go around the country, and I've seen the top guys in the country, I've seen the best at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge and these top camps. The Midwest top players are as good as any of the top players anywhere in the country. But there's no doubt we don't have as many of them as they do, say, down the Southeast. And that's the difference between the Midwest and other regions.
All right, Josh. Well, travel safe and enjoy your weekend. Stay warm, and we'll hit you up down the road, maybe get you on again before National Signing Day. But appreciate all the work you do and you can see Josh's work certainly on our site and many sites along the Big Ten and around the country as well. So, Josh, thanks again, and we'll look forward to talking again soon.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, we're going to take a couple-minute break, and then we'll talk a little more Purdue football, but obviously also Brian spent yesterday up in Chicago at Basketball Media Day, and we'll get a little preview, too, of what he thinks about where the Boilermakers are. Purdue's first exhibition game, men's exhibition game, is I believe it'll be Tuesday night in Mackey Arena. So we'll hit that and more. Stay tuned, and we'll join us. Stay with us, and we'll join you again in 2 minutes on Golden Black Live.
Check out the Purdue collection now at Follett's. Boiler up with Nike Fantastic T-shirts, League and Champion fashion colors. Simply fabulous, simply Follett's. Purdue pride everywhere on game day. Nike sideline, worn by the team, by the players, and by you. And make every day game day with tailgate toss. Follett's, Purdue pride, a Purdue tradition, 17 game day locations.
Going to the Purdue game? Stay at Hilton Garden Inn, West Lafayette at the Wabash Landing. Your family will love the well-appointed guest rooms, the pool, whirlpool, fitness center, the breakfast buffet, and the amazing Hilton Garden Inn staff. Located just 4 blocks from Purdue University, Hilton Garden Inn has long been the choice for Purdue fans. Call today for a reservation and make Hilton Garden Inn your #1 choice.
Let State Farm agent Trent Johnson handle all the moving parts to your insurance. Whether it's for auto, home, life, or financial services, Trent Johnson is there with more ways to help and more ways to save. Call or visit Trent today. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Friday Night Frenzy. It's about tradition. It's about pride. It's about rivalries. It's about commitment. It's about teamwork. It's about the action of the game. On Friday nights, when area high school teams hit the field for the game, our team hits the field to get you the scores, the highlights, and all of the action. Friday Night Frenzy, a high school tradition.
Segment 3, Gold and Black Live. Brian Newbert, Alan Karpick with you. And Brian, we've had Roosevelt Colvin give some interesting comments in segment 1 just about not only his role with the Big Ten Network, but Purdue football. Josh Helmholt kind of brought us up to date and a little bit on what Midwest recruiting and Randy Gregory and on down the line. So if you missed the first 2 segments, we'll post those online on our site a little bit later this evening. But Brian, obviously last night or yesterday, you spent the entire day in Chicago and the night before as well. What were your overriding, at Big Ten Media Day, your overriding impressions of what you saw? Obviously, the Big Ten and men's basketball absolutely loaded this year, almost unprecedented in terms of talent at the top.
Yeah. You sort of wonder if we're not getting to the point now where we're overblowing the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten's going to be really good, but it's just seems like we're talking about the Big Ten like it's the greatest conference in the history of college basketball. Obviously, the AP poll just came out today. Indiana's #1. I think Michigan and Ohio State are all up there in the top 10. I don't think that's a surprise at all. I think those teams are all going to be very, very good. Would not discount Michigan State ever. Would not discount Wisconsin ever. I think Purdue is going to be better than people think. I think they obviously have a lot of inexperience, but history has shown at Purdue the last time they had a lot of inexperience, they were pretty good. Obviously, that's going to have to come together pretty quickly, but I do really think Purdue can be better than people think. Now, whether they could be better than people think, but when you get to the Big Ten and every game is kind of a sausage factory, so to speak, then I don't know if it's really going to show all that much. I think Purdue's going to have to play through a lot of mistakes early in the season. That's pretty much par for the course anytime you have this sort of youth. But I think this is a group that can probably come together pretty quickly and be pretty decent by the end of the year.
How does Matt Painter look at this? I mean, in terms of, he's been down this road before. Coached long enough that you have rebuilding or reloading years. Do you sense he's more energized just because he's got a new group to work with, or how do you think he looks ahead of this season?
I think he enjoys the challenge of not knowing. I think this is a blank slate for him this year because he has so many new guys, and he's going to have to play completely differently. Purdue basketball for the last however many years has been defined by certain ways of doing things, defined by certain principles, styles of play, etc. I just don't think, I don't know if that's the case anymore going into this particular season. I think he said something really interesting yesterday. He was talking about last year, which was a team he probably had to fight more than any team he's had at Purdue, where it just kind of wasn't working halfway through the year. All the stuff Purdue had done to that point in terms of how it plays defense, how it plays offense, how it just does everything. It just wasn't working. They lost a bunch of home games middle of last year that they really could have won, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana. And what he said that was pretty interesting yesterday was that he thought that at that point of the season, the coaching staff realized that the best thing it could do was just to accept that team for what it was and what it's not, instead of complaining about them being a bad defensive team and just hoping they would be when maybe that's not what they were equipped to do. They just basically kind of took the attitude of let's go shoot some threes and have some fun, I think was the exact way he put it. Now, I don't think that's how practice was run. I don't think he just let them go out there and shoot a bunch of threes. I'm sure, the focus and the emphases stayed the same, but there was almost kind of a little bit of a shift last year. I think you saw that in their play when things turned around a little bit. It coincided with, Kelsey Barlow being kicked off the team. I think that helped. But I also think the coaching staff, as Painter said yesterday, just accepted that team for what it is. Now, you go into this season with that same approach. You accept this team for what it is, but you don't know what it is. So that's what these practices are for now, to figure out what it is, to figure out how you want to run your offense, how you want to run your defense. He's even experimenting playing some zone. I don't know if that's going to be a big deal or not, or maybe a couple possessions a game. I don't think it's going to be their base deal or whatever. I wouldn't expect any sort of massive philosophical shift in this program, but I just don't think As he keeps saying, he likes his team's talent, but he doesn't like its experience, which is true. He thinks they've got, as much experience, or talent. He thinks they've got enough talent to be a real factor in the Big Ten, but he just doesn't know if they can be because they're so young.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that you wrote in our basketball yearbook, which for you subscribers out there, I think mailed a couple days ago, so hopefully you'll be getting it soon. But I think one of the things that interesting also is that he liked last year's team in terms of the makeup. I mean, you can't help but like Ryan Smith in terms of people. Lewis Jackson, Rob Hummel on down the line. That may have made it easier for him to let it go, too. I mean, and like meaning that he respected them. It's just that they didn't play defense maybe the way he wanted. But that was an interesting dynamic that he brought to the table about the way that team played last year.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that halfway through the season when they weren't playing as well as he wanted them to or they could have. I don't think he was out there wishing there was a waiver wire so he could cut half those guys and bring in new guys. I think he liked that team. That team just didn't fit the mold. Yeah. And now you kind of wonder what that mold even is. This is a really, really different team. We talk so much about how they have more size than they've had since, the mid-2000s at Purdue. But at the same time, they're also very different on the perimeter. They're a little quicker, they're a little stronger, they're a little bit bigger outside. When you look at this year's freshmen compared to the 2007 group that was so good right away, the difference is in their bodies. These guys have college bodies right now. Those guys were gangly and a little bit awkward. They were just so skilled and so mature that they were able to come to college basketball right away and have success. I think the jury's going to be out on this group in terms of whether it's going to have that poise to it or that, I don't want to say maturity because there's a downside to that word also, but we'll just kind of have to wait and see with this group.
And maybe a difference also 2007-08, the Big Ten not quite as good in Purdue. Purdue was able to navigate its way through that. But I also think, as we remember too, and I'm trying not to really, I really agree with you, there's not a lot of comparison. There's comparison in terms of youth, but there's a lot of differences between obviously Hummel, Moore, and Johnson. But this is a team that had, that team lost to Wofford that you pointed out before, and there'll be Woffords out there for Purdue this year in all likelihood.
Yeah, I mean, that's something you're just going to have to live with early in the season. It stands to reason to suggest there's going to be inconsistency. They're going to have to play through some mistakes. They're going to turn the ball over. That's something they didn't do hardly at all last year. That's going to happen. There's just no way around it. But that's what the non-conference season's for. You look at that 07 team. They lost to Watford. They got beat by Iowa State in Vegas. As Painter always says, they were down 16-0 to Florida International. At the same time, they also blew a huge lead at Missouri too in the second half. So that. It certainly wasn't easy for that group, however easy they might have made it look. But that's what the non-conference season's for. Now, when you kind of go into this season and you compare this year's Big Ten to the 07 Big Ten, on paper, this one looks like a monster compared to that one. But at the same time, that team in 2007 won at Wisconsin when no one won at Wisconsin. Yeah. That team, I don't want to put any asterisks next to what that team did based on, the Big Ten being down or anything like that, because that team was good. Now, what was interesting about that team is it was almost so young to understand that it wasn't supposed to win the way it did right away. You kind of wonder if this team kind of has that same quality. That group wasn't afraid of anything. Yeah. Now, part of that, too, you had leadership, too, in Chris Kramer, Keaton Grant. Also, I think you have that this year, too, DJ Bird, Tyrone Johnson, but you just don't know about those intangibles. This group has to have those same intangibles that group did.
How did DJ and Tyrone handle themselves yesterday in terms of being, a new experience for them, being up in Chicago? How was that for them?
No, they weren't any different around me. I'm sure they were fine. I mean, they're two pretty mature kids. I think they probably understood that, coming into this year that they're the face of the program now, and they're going to have to, answer the same questions over and over again, et cetera, et cetera. So, they had their media day Monday, so they're probably used to it. I'm sure they were fine.
Yeah, that's true.
They were well dressed. I'll tell you that.
And Tyrone obviously is going to have to step up they both certainly showed signs of doing that. The best half of their careers was the second half of last season, certainly for both of those guys, trending well, and yet it'll be interesting to see how they blend with the young guys and who ends up doing what, so to speak, with this basketball team.
Right. When we were sitting around talking to Painter yesterday, we were talking about stars for some reason. I don't know how it came up, but we were talking about the 07 group and how Hummel and E'Twaun Moore became stars, so to speak, and he was talking about how his team doesn't really have any stars right now. I'm not so sure Tyrone Johnson's not close. The way he played in some of those games down the stretch last year, the way they won at Michigan, the way he played against St. Mary's in the NCAA tournament, he didn't look that far off.
Yeah.
Now, things are going to be a little bit different now. He's not going to have centers guarding him like he did last year because Purdue could spread the floor so much. But from what I saw in practice on Monday, he looked like he was really shooting the ball better. I know he's shooting free throws well in practice. I know he's healthy for the first time in his career going to a season. I know he's trimmed down. He looks really good. I think he should be just overflowing with confidence right now the way he played at the end of last year. I think he understands this is kind of his time now, that he doesn't have to wait his turn. There's no E'Twaun Moore in front of him anymore. So, I mean, I really expect a big season from him.
Yeah, 22 points against Michigan, huge win. Probably Purdue's biggest road
Big baskets, too.
Yeah,
I mean, we're not just looking at final numbers. We're looking at
and doing that also against St.
him.
Mary's. And of course, DJ Bird obviously coming off the bench and lighting up Ohio State and continuing that throughout the course of the second half of the year. So it's going to be big from that standpoint. Any guys that you're going to be, when Purdue opens up exhibition play this week on the 30th, anybody that you're really going to be keeping an eye on? I mean, outside of the obvious, you got all these freshmen to watch, but anybody that is it Donnie Hale? Is it literally all of the above?
Raphael Davis, because it's kind of interesting. He led them in scoring in Italy. Of the newcomers, he's the guy who maybe they need to play the least because Purdue's got some other options there in the wing, especially with DJ Bird moving out there. I'm curious to see how he fits in. I know, he's always scored everywhere he's been. He's put up big numbers scoring the ball one way or another. I think it's different now. He can't just overpower people to get to the basket anymore. But a scorer is a scorer. They find ways, and I think he's a scorer. He also plays really hard. He's a really motivated kid. It's just going to be interesting to see where he finds his niche, whether it's as a guy who's going to be kind of instant offense off the bench or whether he's going to be kind of a defensive grinder right away. He's got the body, he's got the strength to be a good defensive player. Seems like he's got the want to. So it's just going to be interesting to see how he carves out his niche.
Yeah, absolutely, and it'll be interesting to see who evolves into that new crowd favorite. And again, back in 07, 08, they all seem to, but it'll be interesting to see what role they all play. Let's turn back to football here. We have just a couple minutes left in the show. Obviously, a challenge in front of the Boilermakers. We talked about that at the top of the show, and even with Roosevelt Colvin. But we talked about the no margin for error till we're blue in the face. But this is a game up in Minneapolis that, on paper, it just feels like this is a game Purdue should be able to assert its advantage, so to speak. And yet, we've seen games when they haven't done that. But what do you expect tomorrow from that?
It's hard for me to say Purdue's better than anybody right now. Before they've won a game in the Big Ten, they haven't won a game in a month. But Purdue's the better team here Saturday. I'm pretty certain of. I think they're catching Minnesota at a good time because they're going through this kind of transition offensively. They're going with a freshman who's playing for the second time in his college career tomorrow. They just moved their multi-year starter, a quarterback. The guy they've built their offense around the last couple of years, they just moved him to receiver, and he's hurt. Their offensive line is banged up. I just think this is a game Purdue should win, but I don't know if, with the inconsistency around this program the last couple of years, I just don't know if I can ever expect them to do anything. I think they should win, and I expect them to win, but at the same time, you never know. Yeah.
And we got a question. I don't know if this is for basketball or for football, but what are the trap games on the schedule that you're feeling? And from Billy, I will say that this is a game. If Purdue's going to get to 7 wins, which I think our entire office staff picked for the Boilermakers this year, this is non-negotiable. I don't think tomorrow.
No, this is a must-win
tomorrow. But you look at the schedule, and it's dangerous to do that. Obviously, we just said a month ago that Penn State was a game Purdue could handle. Now, obviously, some serious questions because Penn State is playing very well. They play the Buckeyes this weekend, and it'll be interesting to see what plays out there. Trap games for me, obviously Indiana, you never know. The Hoosiers came in a couple years ago, not very good. Purdue was obviously dinged up. They come in and win. Indiana is trending well offensively. Illinois, everybody completely writes off. I understand why, but a team that's very talented. And I guess the answer is all of the above are trap games for Purdue, probably.
Well, I don't know if the word trap game is necessarily appropriate here because for it to be a trap game, you have to be the better team. And right now, Purdue hasn't shown a whole lot to suggest that they're the better team over anybody. Now, I just said Purdue's better than Minnesota, so what am I talking about here? But I think that, when you just look at records, I think obviously, you worry about Purdue getting knocked off by one of these teams that's 0-3 in the Big Ten, just like Purdue is. I think Illinois is really bad. I think Indiana can score. I think the days of expecting rollovers on Indiana are dwindling. I think Indiana can really score, and if they can score, any team that can score, can Purdue keep up with this offense the way it's playing? I don't know.
All right, we're down to a couple minutes left, but we did a question about a guy that I have enjoyed watching this year early on, number 16, Delapo McCarthy. You haven't seen. He seems to make plays when the ball gets thrown his way. How high is his ceiling, in your opinion, or will he be a guy that they're going to depend on? Obviously, O.J. Ross's injury has something to do with that, but how do you see that?
You are going to see him tomorrow a lot, because simply by virtue of the fact O.J. Ross is hurt and he plays O.J. Ross's position. So he's going to be out there, assuming O.J. Ross can't play, which Danny Hope said on Tuesday he's highly questionable. Yeah. And when Danny Hope says that on Tuesday, that means he might not have a leg. But no, I kid. But yeah, I certainly think you're going to see more of him from here on out. I said that 5 weeks ago also, and then he disappeared. But I think there's a role for him in this offense. They talked at Ohio State about wanting to get more physical on the boundary. Yeah. You saw Delapo McCarthy play more. He would have played more anyway because of Ross. But you also saw Charles Terwoodzo play. He's another 6'4" receiver who didn't even seem like he was on the radar screen for playing time a couple weeks ago. Then all of a sudden he shows up in the field at Ohio State in the
last plays of the game.
In the second half, no less, and he's on the field for the fourth down. Your last hope. Yeah, he's out there. So it seems like they were making a concerted effort last week to get more physical on the perimeter. Purdue's receivers are fast and they're quick, but they're small. So when you want to run out to the boundary and you want to do this east-west passing that they're doing, throwing it out to the perimeter and trying to make some yards after catches, it's important to have some physicality out there. And I think that's kind of where Delapo McCarthy comes in. So that's why I think you are going to see him the rest of the year.
All right, time for one more question. Tomorrow, Ralph Bolden. We saw a guy that looked a little bit more like Ralph Bolden last week at Ohio State. 9 carries, I think 35 yards. Had a good 8 or 9 yard run in there. Do you expect to see more of him this week?
Yeah. I thought you saw some flashes last week of kind of 2009 Ralph Bolden, 2010 Ralph Bolden, because sometimes when he's trying to get the edge and somebody's running step for step with him, he's kind of got this little way of slipping past that guy and getting 5-6 yards. I think you saw that last week. Certainly he's put a lot of work in to get back to this point, and it looks like he's starting to round back into form. And more importantly, Purdue is, last week anyway, they put in place kind of more of an infrastructure to run the ball successfully. They ran 2-back sets, they ran a lot of 2 tight end stuff, they emphasized the running game, and that was against Ohio State. If you do that now this week against Minnesota, who's not very good against the run, you should be able to have some success. Now, I don't know if he's going to put up big numbers because they're obviously rotating guys, Akeem Shavers, Akeem Hunt, Ralph Bolden, Brandon Cottom's going to get his touches. Last week they gave the ball to Antavian Edison some. So I don't know if you'd want any of those guys on your fantasy team, but I think, Ralph Bolden's going to have more opportunities to contribute.
Yeah, that's may play a big role in how Purdue finishes this 2012 season. So we're going to be back next week. Next Friday, as we always are, 2 o'clock, heading into the Penn State game. And I want to thank Brian Newbert. I want to thank also Gordon Jackson and, of course, Kim Caldwell and Lydia Williams, all those that help us put this show together. If you missed part of it and want to watch it, it's darn riveting. So make sure you tune in. We'll post it on the site here in a couple hours when Gordon gets it put together for us. I want to thank our sponsors, Hilton Garden Inn, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, and Phillips Follets, Purdue Pride, our game day tradition since 1945. So we'll look forward to seeing you, and we'll have plenty to talk about next week. Appreciate all the questions on the chat, and we look forward to talking to you next week on Gold and Black Live.